Hello, here we are on Chapter 7 of Part 3. The Great Hall of the palace had been turned into a laboratory. By some incredible means, the Proc had managed to obtain all the things the professor asked for. The professor was stunned when he entered the hall for the first time. The vast, normally empty room was now filled with the most modern scientific equipment, plus benches, chairs, blackboards, bottles, and tubes of every description. But where did you get all this? How could you possibly manage it? The Proc looked a little smug. I borrowed it. You borrowed it? From your laboratory at the university. What? Don't worry, I'll put it all back. You do your job, I'll do mine. The palace was bustling with excitement. Everyone had been advised of the remarkable experiment that was going to be conducted. As a result, the professor was given the utmost respect and attention. He began to work. The children wisely left him alone, but toward the end of the day they did peek in on him just to make sure that he was all right. They found him seated on a high stool, his head in his hands. Sheets of paper were scattered all over the floor. A waste paper bin was full to overflowing. The blackboard was covered with formulas. Lindy touched the professor's arm. "Everything all right?" she whispered. Oh, my dears, I'd quite forgotten about you." He seemed very distracted and rubbed his eyes wearily. "I just don't seem to be able to get anywhere," he sighed. "It'll take a miracle." "It's a miracle that we're even here," Tom reminded him. "Yes. Remember what you said about that?" added Ben. "You said that miracles only happen after a lot of endeavor. A mind has to be ready and open before a miracle can happen." "But that's just it," the professor replied desperately. "That's the problem. Right now, my mind isn't open. I've been sitting here thinking so hard I realize now why I was unable to cross the bridge, why I couldn't see it. I was torn between two worlds. I was preoccupied with my forthcoming journey to Washington, and I was worried about finishing my paper. I always worry if my work is not completed. So the real world was fighting with the world of my imagination. My concentration was hopelessly ruined." "Well, if you realize all that, can't you make it right?" Ben said simply. The professor was annoyed. "Do you have any idea of the magnitude of this miracle you're asking for? I couldn't see the bridge, yet you're asking me to make a wangdoodle." "I know what you need," Lindy said in her practical voice. "You need a scrappy cap." "That's it!" cried Tom. "It would help you to concentrate." "Great idea. Come on. We'll go and ask the Proc about it," said Ben. They rushed towards the door. "No, children, wait," the professor called after them, but they had gone. A short time later the Proc arrived. He placed Lindy's bonnet on the workbench. "Having a few problems?" "A few? That's a masterpiece of an understatement." "Well, try the bonnet. It might work." "Oh, come on, my good fellow." The professor looked impatient. "You know as well as I do that those hats mean nothing. They're not magic at all." "They're not?" "Of course not. They're just a device, something for the children to believe in, to help them bridge the gap." The Proc gave a small smile. "Well, they obviously work well for them. I wouldn't underestimate those hats if I were you." "I don't follow." "It's quite simple. You say the hats are not magic, yet the fact is that without them, the children would never have believed enough to get to Wangdoodle Land. As you pointed out, by wearing the hats, they were able to bridge the gap. Obviously, you're having a lot of problems right now. You're trying to bridge a gap too, so it would seem to me that Miss Lindy has a sensible idea. Try the hat. What have you got to lose?" The professor banged his fist on the table. "But I'm telling you, the hats are just a contrivance. There's nothing special about them." "If you say so." The Proc was irritatingly calm. He eased himself to the door with his long, gliding walk. "I'll see you later." "Proc, what if this experiment is a failure? Supposing I don't succeed?" The Proc opened the door. "I suggest we wait and see how you get on. If I don't make another Wangdoodle, you're not going to give us the hats, are you? You intend to keep us here. You're not going to let us go at all." "But how can I possibly keep you here?" the Proc replied innocently. "You just said that the hats mean nothing." "I couldn't stop you from leaving." "Yes, but you know the children believe." "Right now, the children are having a grand time and couldn't care less about going home. I suggest you stop worrying about them and concentrate on making a Wangdoodle for His Majesty. Plenty of time later to talk of going home." He quietly left the room. The professor stared after him and thought for the umpteenth time that the Proc was a maddening fellow. He sighed deeply and looked at Lindy's hat on the workbench. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands. In the olden days, people really believed that magic emanated from the hat. They believed that the hat they believed in the hat just as much as they believed in the Whangdoodle. Ben and Tom and Lindy certainly believed that the hats were the reason for their success. Was it possible? Could he have underestimated the Scrappy Caps? Were they magic after all? The professor considered the possibility and very slowly put the bonnet on his head and tied the ribbons beneath his chin. He sat still and waited. There was an uncanny light in the great hall, but he was used to that. His years of practice had taught him any period of sustained concentration brought with it a feeling of bright, strong light. The children had discovered it also. He looked around the laboratory at the familiar equipment and at his notes and equations. He rested his chin on his hands and thought about the Whangdoodle. Quite suddenly, it happened. A strange sensation crept over him. There was a feeling of lightness, as if a great weight were being lifted from his shoulders. He forgot about the children and the Proc. Thoughts and ideas flooded into his mind like the water that raced down the hillsides to join the Golden River. The professor reached for a pad and pencil and began to write as fast as he could. And we will keep on with Chapter 7 next time.